Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, to a special edition of Imrama Media in Venezuela, in Caracas, with the Venezuelan journalist, Gabriela Mesones Rojo. Gabriela, thank you for joining me today. It is such a pleasure to have you and to be working with you during this really unprecedented time for your country. How are you doing?
Hi, Melanie. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. So, everything here in Caracas is quite calm. So, I'm also quite calm, which is good. Things have been pretty quiet the last couple of days. After Saturday, I think people were very eager to buy food, buy medicine, and get back to their homes. But now I feel everything is going back to normalcy little by little. Little by little, stores have begun to open. You can see more cars on the street. I just had a call with my dad. This isn't the same situation in all the areas in Caracas, of course, it changes. My dad was telling me that he went to downtown Caracas. For reference, for people who don't know Caracas, downtown is where Miraflores is, and it's usually an area with heavy police presence. So he mentioned that the police presence is super heavy, that there are no militaries around, and that basically they closed a lot of streets to have an anti-imperialism protest. So that's a little bit how the streets of Caracas are looking.
So they have closed the streets downtown, and is that where we saw the sort of Colectivo presence the other day, where they were sort of telling everyone go home, get off the streets the other night?
Yes.
We saw that stuff on social media.
Yes, that was the area. It's during the morning is all coming back to normal. During the evening, everyone tries to be home. It's extremely silent, and there are of course some areas where Colectivos have taken control and they have imposed sort of an unofficial curfew. Some barrios people can get after 7, after 9, stuff like that. Downtown Caracas is sort of one of those places where some places in downtown, Colectivos have told people not to arrive later than certain hour.
Yeah, and is that a little like having your dad tell you what to do? When the Colectivo tells you not to be there, you just don't.
Yeah, you definitely follow instructions. Also, everything is closed, so going to the street would be kind of unpurposeful.
Yeah. What are you going to do? What are you going to do out there right now? Yeah. Well, I'd love to go through, because remember that for a lot of people, they really don't know much about what is happening in your country. They don't know a lot about what it is like inside it all. And you and I have been talking about this, that so much people talk about geopolitics, they talk about tankers, they talk about this or that. They don't know what life is like. Can you tell me what you see? So, for example, I call this the Arepas Rule, because you said that is one way that people in Caracas know how things are in the city. Can you explain that a little bit to me?
So just to also give a little bit of context, in Venezuela, we have experience with food shortage. So it's something that we've seen in international media. We've also seen thousands of images of the empty supermarkets, empty pharmacy stores. We saw them in 2017, 2018, the highest peak of the humanitarian emergency. So of course, nervous buying is sort of a PTSD reaction, because we know what it's like to have food and medicine and gasoline shortage. So for my surprise, the first day on Saturday, the first thing everyone did was go out to get the essentials. And people were buying a lot of essentials. I remember I was in the line. I did about 4 hours of queue that first day. It was
4 hours.
It was very slow. And I remember that the supermarket had a glass door, and we were looking inside at what people were buying, and there were people taking away 15, 20 harina pan. And of course, people in queue were saying, food, we all need to eat. So it's not good that people are taking and, gathering so much food for themselves. So this is a worry that has been on people's mind. But now, a couple of days has passed, and I have to say I'm pretty happily shocked that the supermarkets have stocked up pretty quickly. I went back to the supermarket today and they had harina pan, that, as you mentioned, is the first thing that Venezuelans go out to buy when there is some sort of crisis. And it was completely stocked up with harina pan, with some canned goods, milk, water. Maybe it was less stocked with stuff like meat and vegetables. But when it comes to long-term food, it was pretty stocked. I'm very happily surprised.
And in that, and harina pan, just for those of us who don't know it, it's something everyone eats, everyone loves. It's the bread, right? It's the cornmeal bread.
So, yeah, harina pan is a corn flour. It is very important in Venezuela. It's what we use to make arepas, which is like the breakfast foundation of our country. Mainly is iconic over here. And it's a flour that lasts very long time, and it's sort of a round bread that you can fill with anything. You can fill with ham, cheese, meat. So depending on what you have to fill it up, it can be a really good meal. So that's why Venezuelans, this is the first thing on their mind. We have to go buy harina pan.
Okay, so the fact that we're seeing that there, that's one of the ways that the stores are open. The streets were relatively quiet in terms of the official presence of authorities. And third, the harina pan, the arepas, is in the stores. So that gives you a feeling that Venezuelans are finding some sort of adaptation to the way things are right now. Is that fair to say then?
Definitely. Yeah. I also get the feeling that people are very afraid of chaos. So I get the feeling that people are doing their best not to be part of that chaos. I think that's why people are following Colectivos orders also so easily. And, also in the same queue that I mentioned, that people might be getting a bit upset seeing that people inside were buying all of the food. Still, people were very patient, very organized, very quiet. And I think this speaks a lot. Like, we've lived chaotic moments in the past. And we've dealt with them. And right now, the feeling I have is that everyone's trying to keep it as peaceful and as unproblematic as possible.
I think, you said something about claustrophobia when we were speaking before. And I wonder if you could say something about that. Is that partly because there's a feeling that now for Venezuelans, you are in a little bit of an island in a way?
Yes, isolation is a huge part of what we're feeling right now. We're also accustomed to this isolation feeling. On December, this last couple of days, there was also, for example, an airspace shutdown. So no planes could leave or come into Venezuela. So this was a huge deal because 8 million people have migrated. Most families, if not all families in Venezuela, have someone who lives abroad. So December is a hugely important moment to just see each other, hug each other, spend Christmas together. In most cases, in my particular case, for example, I was going to travel to Chile. My sister lives there. My little nephew lives there. I haven't seen her in 6 years. So I was so excited to spend Christmas there. They shut down the airspace, so of course I couldn't go there. So many people couldn't come here to spend the holidays with their family. So emotionally, it's tough because Christmas is a moment to spend with your family. And of course, migration has deeply impacted families in Venezuela. So having this sort of things, even, the closing of the airspace, it wasn't long-term or anything, but it was in an important date. So this sort of thing does make us feel very, very isolated. And also right now, I think we've always had the opportunity to, if things get really bad in Venezuela, we're not trees. We can move around the world easily. That situation is changing a little bit right now. And I think it's one of the things that worry people a lot. If things get worse in Venezuela, where are we going to go? Migration is not as easy, and entry in other countries has changed radically in the last year. So how is migration going to look like now is one of the questions that we may have.
Yeah, I think about something someone asked me, which was yesterday. They said, well, what do Venezuelans think people misunderstand about them? And I said, well, that's not a question for me. I would say that is a question I would ask you. What do you think people misunderstand about Venezuelans? What do you hear people feel misunderstood?
Well, there's been precisely with our migration, there's been a lot of stigmatization. There's been huge criminalization, of course. And there's also an understanding that the people who left abandoned their country, like they didn't fight for it. That's something I've heard so many times. And Venezuelans hate it when we're told that we didn't fight. It's something that's also being said a lot right now. Like you took the easy way out and you're asking other countries to solve your problems that you didn't solve. And the reality is nothing further from the truth. Venezuelans, I think, for the last 20 years, since maybe 2002, have been very active and very politically inclined to be a part of what's going on in Venezuela. Many of the people who are migrating are doing so because they have been persecuted, because they have been exiled. So all these people who are saying, they're criminals and they're coming to, of course, when there is a huge migration wave happening, of course, a lot of people are going to be involved in that. There was huge crime in Venezuela. So, it's logical to think that many people of different professions, let's just say it that way, can migrate. But there has been a generalization a lot about why we are migrating, what has led us to go, and why we want to migrate, and what we want to do in these other countries. Most people just want to survive and have a better life. It's not that they're going somewhere else to take away someone's job or to start a international crime ring or something.
No, it's there's not enough. Like, how could you have 8 million crime rings, right? Like that would be a lot.
That would
A
be a
lot.
lot.
But you all and you mentioned that stigma and that idea of people as criminals or as bad things. And what is the one that they have in Peru? In Peru, they say that the women are out to get husbands. Is that right?
Yes, there's also a huge hypersexualization of Venezuelan women. In Venezuela, we have a huge culture around beauty. Of course, this is a bigger conversation. It is a very toxic culture that has been born from the whole Miss Venezuela thing. But in Latin America, there's been like this sort of rejection of Venezuelan women precisely because they're too beautiful or too sexual. So they see them as a threat. So, of course, that there have been music videos called Veneca Roba Maridos. There have been like a couple of social media content that, of course, you can laugh and you can think that it's not a big deal. But on the other hand, femicides against Venezuelan women is one of the problem of female Venezuelan migrants, and over sexualization and trafficking is also one of the problems that Venezuelan women face when they want to leave the country. So this hypersexualization, which may seem like a joke, actually can have huge consequences.
Yeah, and it is again that idea of the putting the worst face on somebody who is leaving. Is that fair
Yeah.
to say? Yeah. And if you were going to explain something to somebody else, you would say, like, just don't assume the worst of all of us. Yeah. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, not only don't assume the worst, but also be open to enjoy the best. I think there's also closure to enjoying, I don't know, our gastronomy, for example. We have rich, complex regional gastronomy, which is great. And I think people around Latin America love arepas, they love empanadas. But in some places, I've noticed that they're like, oh, now street food is only Venezuelan street food. And I can only think, one of the beautiful things of migration is how it enriches the other culture so much. So I would say don't assume the worst, and also open your mind to enjoy the best, because migration can be such a rich cultural process we've been migrating. Humans have been migrating forever. Migrating is such a natural experience. We see it in nature. So I think we have to incorporate migration and displacement a little bit more into our lives.
Now, I love that you said that enjoy the best, because that is something that I have experienced so much in my career and in my life, is I get to enjoy the best of being part of different cultures and meeting new people and seeing the strength. So for people who have no experience with Venezuelans, tell me the best. What is the best? Aside from arepas, aside from food, what is the best of Venezuelan people, and how is that showing up right now in Caracas, where you are? What are you seeing? What is the best?
So I would say that the best of Venezuelan people is how contradictory we are. Sometimes you can. My mom has a story when she was pregnant with me, and I've always felt this story represents Venezuela so well. She was very pregnant with me. She had a huge belly, and she was trying to get on a bus, and the bus started the car, so she almost fell. So this guy helped her out, and he was so mad at the driver, like, don't you see that this lady, she's pregnant, you just put her in danger, this is unacceptable, how we treat women on the street. And my mom was like, oh my god, he's such a gentleman. So he got her on the bus, he sat her down, he made sure she was okay, and then he proceeded to rob the bus. So for me, this is something that's so Venezuelan. Someone can do something that's maybe morally questionable, and 1 minute later, they will do also that's very morally accepted and very kind and very generous to people. So I know that some people hate this sort of contradictions. I actually enjoy them a little bit.
That's an amazing story, and speaks to the nuance that really exists in humanity, quite frankly, right? But we don't like to admit it. None of us like to admit it. But maybe it's a good thing that we talk about nuance, because in a time like this with uncertainty, and you tell me how much of this you can speak about, given the challenges in the country. You have a new president, and what are people's opinions? What do people say about her strengths and maybe her nuance?
So if I had to resume it in 2 words, I would say uncertainty and, again, contradiction. I think people generally want to celebrate that Maduro was captured and taken away. Maduro was not a beloved leader. We have faced a humanitarian emergency since 2014. People have been struggling a lot. We have one of the biggest refugee crises in the world. We've had food shortages, medicine shortages. Our public health system is completely collapsed. 400 media have shut down. So the landscape, Maduro's legacy is not good. So I think people do feel that some sort of justice has arrived at this place. Delcy, of course, has been in Chavismo since the beginning of Chavismo. She has been a high-ranking official since the beginning. She's an extremely smart woman. She's a very astute woman, and she's been able to handle, also as a woman, she's our first woman president, which is contradictory also. So I think on one hand, people are scared because she doesn't represent a change. Of course, she is one of the faces of the regime, and she has been one of the faces of the high-ranking faces of the regime for years, for decades. So of course, people are scared. What is this going to look like? I think people are also impressed because she is the person that's going to deal with the new USA reality in Venezuela. You know, we still don't understand much about how the US is going to control Venezuelan oil, how much they're going to dictate in the country.
Join the club. Yeah.
It does seem like she's the one who's helping them deal with all of this. So this is very contradictory. She has been an revolutionary, anti-imperialist, you know, very vocal, a lot of strength put against imperialism. So to see her in this position is very contradictory. On the other hand, I think people are a little bit disappointed. I think they were hoping that Maduro was going to come out and Maria Corina Machado and Edmundo González Urrutia were going to come in, and it was just going to be as easy as that. And the truth is that, I wish democratic transitions could be as simple. Right now, I think the choice to leave Delcy on her position is a good choice to keep order and to keep Venezuela a little bit away from chaos. It's a bad choice if we want to start a process that includes democratic values.
So it is, what you're saying with her is, I mean, she has a background that is obviously very deep within Chavismo. She is very smart, but then she has control basically of the power structures. That seems to be the case. However, maybe people would have hoped that there could have been some involvement from opposition figures. Is that a fair assessment of what has been said in the streets, or maybe privately in small groups?
Yes, definitely. I think people are asking a lot, what the role of our elected opposition actors is going to be, because we did have an election. Trump mentioned, those elections were rigged. We shouldn't take them into account, but those elections are so important for the Venezuelan people, because in Venezuela, for a lot of years, we've talked about, the possibility of electoral fraud, definitely of electoral irregularities. But of course, we never had the evidence to actually prove it. These people, they steal their elections. So the presidential election was fundamental because we definitely, without a doubt, verifiable voting tallies. Maduro stole that election. There is no doubt. And the Maduro regime was never able to provide any evidence that they had actually won the election. So, of course, it was an election. It felt like a very dictatorial election. I think people sometimes also talk like, no, Venezuela had an election, so it must be a democratic country. It's also not as easy as that. We have had for the past 25 years political exiles, political inhabilitations. Maria Corina herself, she ran in the primaries and she was voted for more than 90% of people to be the opposition candidate, and she wasn't allowed to run. That's why she chose Edmundo González Urrutia. So it's not as easy just as to have elections. It has to really be an election that represents, a diversity of leaderships, a full ecosystem that people feel represented. It also needs people not to be scared of voting, which is not the case in Venezuela. In Venezuela, winning that election, that's also one of the big things. We went out to vote without having any trust on our electoral system. And in most cases with a lot of persecution, saying if you vote for the opposition, we're gonna fire you, or we're gonna put you in prison, we're gonna be violent to you.
And that was when there was a lot of repression. That was when we saw the kind of highest levels of repression, was after that 2024 presidential election. So that was when we saw obviously a lot of people going into exile, and a lot of the kind of public discourse quieting down. I'm curious, would you describe most Venezuelans as pragmatic about how transition looks, or would you say they are hoping for something more? And this is just in terms of what you have been hearing, because I know, you've been out in the streets, you've talked to various people.
I think we're less pragmatic and more emotional. I think.
Interesting. Yeah. So when that is that come from years of waiting, or where do you think that comes from, the emotionalism?
I do feel Venezuelans are desperate for change at the moment, and I do think it's a very emotional feeling. When the bombings happened on Saturday, and a couple of days after, I talked to a couple of friends, to check up on them. How are you? How's your family? And the most common comment was, I can't believe how much we've lived. I mean, we've lived so much. We've lived the imprisonment of our friends, the exile of friends. We've lived how they've been violent to even people who have been in exile, so they've been persecuted even abroad. We've seen so much. We've seen a humanitarian emergency. We've seen a refugee crisis. We've seen coups, so many coups. We've seen, the death of Chavez. We've seen so much for so many years. So right now, there's, a very repeated comment, which is, how much more can we take? Right. So, of course, when you have an entire population that has been deeply affected, it's normal to feel, desperate and a little bit hopeless. Maybe I wouldn't describe Venezuela as hopeless people. I'm actually amazed all the time, because when something happens, it's so easy for us to get hopeful, like, change is coming. And we also tell ourselves, like, we've said this like 7 times before. And, we've also seen Maduro surf pretty important waves and stay in power.
So I want to just touch on, I mean, you said so many important things there. So let's go back to a few of them in order. One was that people are hungry for change, but I know you said earlier that people also don't want chaos. So how do people live in that desire, live in that contradiction day to day?
So in Spanish, we have a saying that's es mejor diablo conocido que diablo por conocer. It means it's best the devil we know than the devil we don't know. So of course, uncertainty is pretty hard to manage. Like right now, we are all hoping for change. And of course, when I say we're hungry for change, it definitely means for the better. Right now, what's happening is that we don't know if this is going to improve our lives or if it's going to make them harder. Which makes it hard right now to really assess like what the impact in the population has had, because now we are starting to see the official death toll and the official damage reports of what happened to the bombing, but it goes way beyond that. What is the impact that this is gonna have on food, on education, on our mental health, on people who are waiting to meet their families soon? How is this going to look like?
What do you think? What would be popular? What could Delcy Rodriguez do? You said that she's known to be a very smart woman. What could she do that would be popular with the general public to give them a sense that they were getting something out of this?
So without a doubt, I'd say releasing the political prisoners. Right now, we have almost 800 political prisoners, all of them in very dire situations. So it's very important for these political prisoners to come out and to be fully liberated. Like people are very clear when they're asking, like, we don't want them to be released, but you have to come back every week to no, fully liberated. Some of them have pretty hard charges on them, like terrorism or spying against Venezuela. So it would be the release of these political prisoners and the drop of the charges that they have.
And that would give a sign to the general public. I mean, it seems like a small number, not to make it trite, but you think that small number would have a big impact for people everywhere?
I do think it will have a deep impact. Usually in Venezuela, the number doesn't seem so high because it's always like rotating a little bit. And December is usually the month that they liberate a lot of political prisoners. For them, I think we call it like, our Christmas present, like, oh, our Christmas present got today, it's December 17, it's because they liberated I think in December they liberated around 100 of them, and they also liberated the last teenager that was under charge with a political, uh, which was very important because after the 2024 election, 8 teenagers were detained here in Caracas and more were detained. I think 3 were detained in Barquisimeto. So the number might seem small, but the detention of teenagers is super hard on the population and super hard on communities. And of course, on families, their entire family structure changes. Women are the ones that see this impact the most because in jails only women can visit the prisoners. So of course the weight of going to visit the prisoners, give them food, give them medicine, whatever they need, falls on women. So it's a huge weight put on people. So right now they have liberated a couple of people as they usually do on December. And of course, the other thing that would be, in my opinion, is to not only liberate these political prisoners, but to stop the arbitrary detentions whatsoever. Right now, that seems to be the case. We're not actually seeing huge repression at the moment. Just for some context, after the 2024 election, more than 3,000 people were detained. This was insane. For extra context, in the 2017 protest that lasted about 3-4 months, 3,000 people were detained in 3-4 months. So in 2024, 3,000 people were detained in 3 days. So it was very hard, very, very hard. And it doesn't seem at this moment that's so critical and that Chavismo feels so threatened and vulnerable that we're seeing a huge repression wave at the moment. So what we are hoping is that repression and persecution patterns will change. We just don't know what it's going to look like now.
And if that were to happen, then that would be something that would signal to people that their lives, which is the biggest question, will improve and could get better. That part of that uncertainty could at least soften a little bit.
Yes, I think this comes from a political perspective. People aren't always extremely worried about politics. I think economy is what they're most worried about. And, you know, most of the times when you ask someone, do you like Maduro? Their answer has really nothing to do with like public policy. They just answer, we've been so poor with Maduro. So sometimes all of it is really reduced to how people, you know, what quality of life people are having. Can they feed their families? Are their families safe? Do they feel vulnerable? Do they not? So sometimes people don't recognize this as policy of something directly of Maduro or the relationship or the dictatorship. But I think these little things can change how we feel, how safe we feel, how comfortable we feel.
And if you are looking for other signs that would make, we talked about normal life, we talked about the kind of morning end of things. You mentioned that people are kind of off the streets right now by sundown. It's almost sundown now. When and how do you notice that nighttime starts to get back to normal? Like, what was it like in December? And what is it like right now? How will we start to see that return?
So this was a weird December. As I mentioned earlier, the airspace was closed, so many people couldn't get in the country. So December, there's been such a huge migration that December is also the month where we get to see people because a lot of people are coming back to visit, so we get to see people. Almost no one came in this December, of course, so it felt a little bit empty. And maybe not as celebratory, but I do think people were very eager of normalcy. I think they were eager of having, you know, a harmonious celebration. There were a lot of also cultural events, concerts in bars, little things. I think people were very eager to have, you know, a happy holiday. Mainly because also people knew that something was going to happen. And in Venezuela, it's very common for things to happen around December, January. It's common because people don't have to be on the street as much. So, if something happens, people can keep safe. So we definitely knew something was going to happen. And it felt a little bit that we were celebrating before the mess started.
Making the most of it while you could.
Yes.
And right now, nothing is happening after dark.
So on January 2nd, the day before the bomb, well, mere hours before the bombing, I remember I was in social media and I remember thinking people are activated pretty early on in the year. January is usually a pretty slow month. But I started seeing things, open bars, things like Retro Market, which is a market of used clothes, was being organized. So, things were being done in the city. Cultural things, people were opening up art exhibits. I mean, things were happening. And I remember I mentioned, I'm so glad people are going back to work really early. But I also remember saying people must be pretty worried about the economy if they're going back this early. So I remember thinking that, and I remember also thinking it feels possible that we can go back to normal, that nothing happens and that we go back to normal. And less than 12 hours later, we were being bombed. So
much for that, right?
Yeah.
So much for that idea. You mentioned that I know you are not an oil expert, and Lord knows there are enough people talking about oil tankers and, all these things. But you mentioned that Venezuelans are talking a lot about the oil and making lots of oil jokes. Is that the case? I'd love for you to tell our audience about that, something you and I were talking about before.
Yes, I think generally Venezuelans are making a lot of jokes on how foreigners understand Venezuela. Because it's not easy to understand. Sometimes I say, I don't understand this at all. How am I going to explain it to someone else? So, of course, our oil industry is extremely complex. Our oil industry under Chavismo is extremely complex. And I think people that don't know Venezuela really think, because we have the biggest or one of the biggest oil reserves in the world, they think that we are this huge potency and we get so much money for oil. But the thing is that in the last 20 years, there's been a systematic destruction of our oil industry. So whenever someone tells us they're going to steal your oil, the thought here is we haven't seen that money. There's a reason why we're in a humanitarian emergency. They already stole that money. So I think it's also, for example, if you compare it to other corruption cases, for example, Tarek El Aissami, he was convicted for corruption and the government did a huge anti-corruption campaign. And the number they gave was that Tarek El Aissami had stolen $25,000 million. So some people are trying to say, how many barrels of oil does the US have to steal for it to even come close to that? So people here in Venezuela are so incredibly accustomed to very high rates of corruption that the reaction when someone tells us, they're going to steal your resources, they just laugh and they're just like, yeah, they're going to steal this barrel of oil that I have here in my home. And there are a lot of memes about that.
How would you rate the Venezuelan meme game?
100. I love it. I'm impressed by it. During the bombings, the bombings hadn't stopped. We were still hearing bombs and we were still at home thinking, are we gonna be bombed? It was very tense. And there were already memes of the bombs. I was very impressed by the meme game of these people.
How important is humor as a coping mechanism for Venezuelans?
I think we deal everything with humor. I think we put humor so much in the equation that I've been in some situations when I'm like, we're a little bit toxic. We can't use humor for everything. But yeah, we do it. We're from the Caribbean, so Why not? Why not laugh about it?
You mentioned before, and I wonder if this plays into it, that there is a combination of hopeless, but then you get hopeful very quickly as a people. What do you think keeps that hope coming back for Venezuelans? What is it that either you hear from people, or if you can say what you personally feel, that keeps hope?
I think different things. For example, people have a lot of hope for their family members who left the country to come back, for example. That is something that they are always, because it is very painful. I know migration is the most normal thing in the world, but for example, how many grandparents are growing old without even meeting their grandchildren? So, of course, family is a huge thing. And it's no coincidence that Maria Corina's campaign was focused on our children are going back, because a lot of people want this. When we had the information that Edmundo had won the election, I thought, oh my God, is my family going back? Are we going to be all together again? So I think that's hugely important. And also, I think Venezuela is a country with so much to do, so much unexplored, culturally, business, so many things that we can really offer and produce. And in music, in culture, in gastronomy, there is so many things to be done. And people have usually the idea that there is a lot of money to be made here in Venezuela. So whenever you talk to someone who has a business, even if it's a small business, the first thing they tell you is, I'm crazy for this government to leave, so we can really start working and making money and doing things and, exporting our culture to the world without it meaning, not it being through migration or displacement, but really, good exploitation of what we're doing.
You can feel the possibilities then. You can feel the possibilities for family to come back and to make something more of what you have in the country. That seems to be the broader sense of what people hope for.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, for example, my city, Caracas, Caraqueña. Caraqueñas are unsufferable with our city. It's a gorgeous city. For me, it's the most beautiful. It's so green. We have a gorgeous mountain called the Ávila. The weather is perfection. So of course, it's a place that you look at it and you say, it's so beautiful, it's so perfect. The people here are so nice and open, and there's so much solidarity and community work, and there are so many things that are so beautiful. But the country is being kidnapped by, a group of people who are not willing to give it back. So of course, there's like this huge beauty and cultural richness, and at the same time there's this violence and this feeling that these people just took control of the country.
Is it the beauty that means that people hold on? Is that what keeps people moving towards trying to bring it back? Or
I think the beauty of the place and the love for their people, watching the people you love suffer, it's really bad to see them. So I think more than the beauty of the place is just hoping that the people around you will be okay.
what keeps you sane on a daily basis when things are difficult or tiring, and this could be for you, or it could be people you've spoken to, what keeps like a daily basis, not the big things. What are the little things?
I have a lot of things. My family, my cats are fundamental. I make them pay rent by forcing them to be in my arms when things get really hard. So my cats, my family, and I'm a huge fan of nature. And Caracas is one of the greenest cities I know. Like sometimes I would just go out and a random tree on the street, I would just look at it and be very impressed with how magnificent that tree is. So I try to do that. And I also like to focus on also being grateful. The world, it's not just about Venezuela being in crisis right now or for the last years. There have been so much crisis in the world. And right now we're seeing a lot of pain and a lot of violence. So I think I just focus on very little things, like a beautiful sunset, and say thank you. When the bombings happened, we talked about the sundown a lot that day, because we were saying, have you seen how beautiful the sky is? And we were saying, is it that beautiful, or are we just happy that we're experiencing it? Because we took the photos and it was like, it's a pretty average sundown, come on. And we were like, we're just happy to be here. So I think focusing on the beautiful but small things is good.
And where do you think, so there are a lot of people who are still experiencing hardship, I mean, in different levels of hardship in your country. What do you think is keeping them going? You do a lot of work covering people who are experiencing the humanitarian emergency in the country. What do you think is keeping them going in these difficult times?
I think family is pretty important for people here. So I think having the support of their families, I think having the support of their families.
I like a little realism in a live stream. Let's keep it real, right? Let's not pretend, right? We're alternative media, right? We're not mainstream.
I'm so sorry.
Not at all. I love it. They tried to stay out of the shot, which I like. So yeah, so family, you think for people who are still struggling, it is family that keeps them going?
That's family, whether family is here or family is abroad. I think if you can have your family safe and safe and happy and content with what they have, I think that's one of the most important things for people here in Venezuela.
The reason I ask you this is because, I've been doing this for a long time. And I think one of the reasons I like doing alternative media is because so often we make things one-dimensional, that when we cover crisis in a country, we make it like wallpaper, right? You are suffering 24 hours a day. And, we are people just like everybody else, and we have loves and families and hopes and despairs and pets and cats and people who walk into live streams. And I think it's so important to understand that about each other, to understand what is different and what is the same. At least that's my little soapbox. It's not inside Caracas, but it's my little soapbox about, I think the more we can understand that, the more we care about each other. As you said, there's lots of crises.
Surviving is hard. Sometimes, surviving is very hard, but the day of the bombing, I remember, you also asked about humor. And I remember that I was in a couple of interviews and I got a couple of messages like, girl, you've just been bombed, but you look really good. And I was like, sometimes it's just as simple as that, as, you can live something that's very traumatizing and very hard, but you survive it. And when you go through it, you can do that. Enjoy, watching your friend's face in an interview, or enjoy a sundown, or just hug your cats, and it's going to feel very good.
What would be, I guess we're going to go through a couple of questions and a recap. And one question is, what could people do or say that would be most helpful for Venezuelans? I've had lots of people asking questions. And I think they want to understand, but also is there something people can do that is helpful right now, or to the Venezuelan people?
So the first thing I'd say is listen to Venezuelan voices. As you mentioned earlier, and also at the beginning of the meeting, there is a huge international conversation about Venezuela right now. We're trying to take advantage of the attention to put out many of the problems that we've had in the last couple of years, but it does feel like such an abstract conversation. And of course, it's abstract. Maybe most of these people have never spoken or met with a Venezuelan person. So, for example, the conversation in our region is currently very worried, because they are like, if Trump did that to Venezuela, is he going to do it to us? Is this part of a bigger plan? And I do believe that they have all the right in the world. They are completely entitled to their opinion. But it does feel a little bit lonely that the only thing that you're worried, we just got bombed. We are going through all of the situation. And again, the thing that you're worried about the most is the consequences that this is going to have for your country. So the first thing I would say is listen to Venezuelan voices, because I think it's not only the best way to be informed, but also the best way to really have empathy for what's happening. When we say listen to Venezuelan voices, of course, Venezuelan voices are not a monolith, which is amazing. It's a whole ecosystem. So listen to Venezuelans is not like you're gonna understand why this posture is correct. No, there are a lot of Venezuelan voices. I'm a huge defender also of local journalism. Of course, I think international journalism is so important, but local journalists are the ones who are really doing the research. They are also, this is their lived experience. This isn't a headline to them. The people, the subjects they cover aren't a story. It's their communities. Most time it's their family members, their friends. So I would say read local media, listen to Venezuelan voices. And if you have a Venezuelan friend, call them up, tell them that you can hug them, because Venezuelans in the diaspora, they get so nervous when this happens. It's also very psychotic, because sometimes I think it's worse for the people abroad, because they have to go on with their daily lives. Like here it's easy to say, I'm nervous, I don't want to go to work today because I'm so tense. Your boss will understand. If you live in London, for example, your boss isn't going to understand that. So it does feel very divisive for them that on one side they have to go on with their lives, they have few people to talk this to. So if you have a Venezuelan friend, call them, send a lovely text message, offer a hug, a beer, whatever you do with your Venezuelan friends. Take care of your Venezuelan people right now.
Is there a Venezuelan beer they should be offering?
Polar, I'm actually a fan of Cerveza Zulia, but Polar is the iconic classic one.
Okay, so either one of those and a hug if they want it to your Venezuelan friends.
Exactly.
And you would probably suggest maybe a cat, offer them a cat as well, just to throw in.
Yes, I don't understand how every person in the world doesn't have a pet, but I mean, if you have a pet, definitely ask your pet for some.
Put the pet in there. Put the pet in there, give that to them as well. I think what I did want to ask, and this takes us a little more down the serious track again, but it's like life is both things. What are the questions we should be thinking about over the next few days? There's going to be a lot of noise. Things are going to keep, happening. And I am always a big fan of kind of going beneath, going a little bit 2 or 3 levels beneath. What should we on the outside be asking and looking for in terms of what is going on? Because instead of just getting caught up in, as you say, this kind of outside conversation, what do you think we should be looking at?
So the first thing I'm thinking is to see, how is repression going to look like? Mm-hmm. Will we be able to have a protest like anywhere else in the world, where you go somewhere and you say, we disagree with this, and just go on with it? Mm-hmm. How is this going to look for journalists? This is why it's so important to really open up detention centers and really understand what's going to happen, because repression and persecution has shaped the life of Venezuelans a lot. So that would be the first. The second would be, what really is going to happen with the oil? We don't really understand very well what this is going to happen. And I would say it's linked to really understanding what is Delcy Rodriguez's role going to look like. What are other political actors from Chavismo? What is their role going to look like? What is the role that the opposition is going to take at the moment? And the humanitarian aspect, I really do think it's very important. How is the humanitarian aspect going to look like? Is food insecurity going to get better or worse? If it gets worse, do we have a plan for that? And another question completely related to the bombings is who's going to help those victims. A couple of victims, there hasn't been a massive collateral damage, which is great, but of course there has been collateral damage. In La Guaira, a block building was almost half of it blew off. Here in Caracas, a woman's house was completely lost. So what's going to happen with those people? Who's going to help them? How are they going to live? What's going to happen? Of course, the state should protect them. So how is that protection going to look like for now on?
Okay. So those are some very clear things to look for and to look at. And there might be other things that come up as we go. I know you and I are going to have some other conversations, which is amazing. I think the last thing I always think of is like, what haven't I asked you about? Like, what have I not asked you that you think I should have asked you, or that you wish I'd asked you?
I wanted to add one last question to the other question, which is there going to be another bombing? We don't know that yet. And if there is going to be another bombing, what's it going to look like? Are they going to take away another political actor for Chavismo? What is like this attacks from the US? What is this? Is this the new normal, or was this a special anecdote in our lives? I think that's one important question. And the last question, what haven't you asked me? You've asked me a lot of questions.
I have asked you a lot of questions.
We've spoken a lot.
I know. I love a lot of questions. I'm so sorry. You know that. You have solidarity with other people around the world, I promise you, who are like, oh, why does she have so many questions? No, but if there's something else, it's important, I think, again, listening to Venezuelans, that if there is something you feel people don't ask or don't understand, I just want to give you a chance to say that. But yeah,
I just feel it's a good moment to get close to Venezuela. I think it's easy just to say, oh, Trump bombed Caracas. I think it's the moment for you to start reading, Venezuelan poets and listening to Venezuelan food, and maybe going to the arepera in your neighborhood and eat an arepa, watching Venezuelan cinema. I think, well, I didn't study journalism. I've been doing journalism for the last almost decade of my life, but I went to university and I studied art history. And the reason why I was in love with it, because it did help me understand. It made me understand through feelings. It made me understand. Sometimes I looked at a face in a portrait and I'd be like, she's upset about what's happening. So we're talking a lot about nuance, and I think art and culture are great for this. Sometimes also watching the news is not good for a lot of people. So when I say stay informed on Venezuela, it doesn't necessarily mean, stay informed in your news channel. Just read poetry, watch cinema, investigate who our artists are. There are so many artists in the diaspora that, I think those things can really help out to get, not only the information, the contextual information that we need, but also this emotional, almost spiritual information that we need.
I could not love that more as a place to end. We are going to be making a big old list of resources for people to check out, and I'm going to be checking them out first. Thank you so much, Gabriela Mesones Rojo, for joining us, for joining us and sharing so much. And yeah, get close to Venezuela, get close to a Venezuelan, listen to some music. My dog likes Venezuelan football songs, so I can listen to some of that. And
great,
yeah.
Melanie. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you so much.
This was fun. I haven't had that many fun interviews. They're usually very to the point and so fast, and you can hardly really take your time to explain the feelings and the context.
Well, the goal is to get wherever we're going, however the story leads us. And I hope we've done that today. Thank you so much. And yeah, put your questions in the comments. We can always come back to them. Thank you so much. And hit like, subscribe, follow, all of the above. Thank you, everybody. Bye. Bye, Gabriela.